So this is 22:30 hours GMT, and this is the same time as 10:30 p.m. British Standard Time in London in the UK on Wednesday the 12th of January 2022. Now this is kind of just 10 hours, let's say 10:30 hours since the staging of the Prime Minister's questions at midday, that is 1200 hours GMT, that was staged in the House of Commons, in the Houses of Parliament in London, in the UK, within quotation marks. So the newspapers that were published before the staging of the Prime Minister's questions obviously were kind of speculating as to what he should do and were commenting on his wrongdoings. And for example, in the financial crimes, it says Johnson faces potentially terminal, that is to say, he might retire, he might quit, or he might be forced out of the post as the incumbent in the post of Prime Minister of the quote UK. So the financial crimes says on its front page on the Wednesday, the 12th of January 2022. The Boris Johnson faces potentially terminal showdown over Downing Street parties. Parties, not political parties, but parties, meaning kind of people drinking alcohol and kind of not working. Party is definitely not working. Party is the opposite of working. And that difference between the meaning of parties and working, that difference actually continues to distinguish or separate the character of the congenital liar Boris Johnson, incumbent in the post of Prime Minister still, and what he should do and what objectively these two statements or phrases or words mean. This is Wednesday, the 12th of January 2022, and we are in a kind of post facto way, kind of previewing the diagnosis that should have taken place before the Prime Minister's questions were staged, but logistical factors come in every day depending on what logistical factors appear. The logistical factors came in so that we didn't broadcast anything up to the 1200 hours GMT when the Prime Minister's questions started. And the main evidence of the lying, the latest set of lies by Boris Johnson, as admitted by Fleet Street, because they don't admit most of the lies as having taken place, as having been perpetrated by the congenital liar Boris Johnson. A congenital liar is the phrase devised by Sylvie Bermann. Bermann is spelled Bermann. Bermann was the diplomat, the main kind of diplomat, the ambassador for France to the UK. That post location is also described as Court of St. James's. So Sylvie Bermann published a memoir focusing on her time in the UK, Britannia. And in that book, she described various things that she had witnessed in the behavior of Boris Johnson, which to her amounted to and constituted sufficient evidence for her to call him a congenital liar. Now, this is the phrase that we have been using as part of the diagnostic analysis in every edition because it is so factual. It is so factual, meaning that a French ambassador or any ambassador from any country that has diplomatic kind of relationship with the UK would be a better placed witness than the various cabals of MPs, ministers, and the other MPs, that is the members of parliament that don't belong to the quote Conservative Party, which is in the common parlance the ruling party in the UK. So we'll come to the details of the Prime Minister's questions and we shall diagnose that ahead of the contents of the papers, Fleet Street papers dated the 13th of January 2022 on Thursday, following the Prime Minister's questions, the editions of Fleet Street papers being printed following the staging of the Prime Minister's questions or PMQs that took place at 1200 hours GMT today, Wednesday, 12th of January 2022. So we are diagnosing the Fleet Street papers in context, which means that we are also taking into account things that are not in the papers dated Wednesday, the 12th of January 2022, and things that would be in the papers of Thursday, the 13th of January 2022. And most importantly, things that will be left out of the papers. Because although there will be technical references to the kind of staging of the Prime Minister's questions, the truth will not be published in Fleet Street papers. For example, the truth even of the questions put to Boris Johnson by the kind of shadow Prime Minister, let's say the opposition person who is the leader of the politically murdered Labour Party and the political murderer of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer. What Keir Starmer had been kind of promoted as in the hours before the actual PMQs were staged, for example, on the BBC, and a woman called the BBC's political correspondent or chief political correspondent, Vicky Young. Vicky is spelled Bivicki, not Vicky. So Vicky Young, moments before the PMQs began being live streamed on the BBC television channels, she said that Keir Starmer, being quote barrister, we call licensed law trader, Keir Starmer, being a barrister, she said, would put or was expected to put forensic questions to Boris Johnson about his lying and his the parties, the party gate, and other falsehood and misleading statements and denials that Boris Johnson had perpetrated up to yesterday, which is Tuesday, because on Tuesday, the 11th of January 2022, there were speeches by some members of the parliament. The most highly profiled and highly widely reported one, short speech, but it was the widest kind of reported speech by a Northern Irish member of parliament belonging to the DUP. So something to D is Democratic and E is Ulster. Ulster is the Northern Ireland political name, and his name is Jim Shannon. Now, Jim Shannon had spoke only very short, kind of few minutes, in which he broke down, and he broke down because he was overcome with sadness, emotion, and traumatizing experience of having to relive the fact that his wife's mother, his mother-in-law, died alone. So Jim Shannon's wife's mother, his mother-in-law, had died alone. And the central reason for that being the compliance by his family, his wife's mother's family, complying with the rules about COVID and maintaining distance. And many hundreds, thousands of people right across the UK have heartbreaking accounts and memories about how their loved ones had to be kind of given the farewell by the bereaved, but from a distance, because they couldn't be near their bed because of the distance rule. And when Jim Shannon spoke, of course, there was absolute silence as he spoke. Silence by the MPs who were present. Most Conservatives weren't present, but the Labour Party is in quotation marks because politically we consider Keir Starmer as politically murdered the Labour Party. But there are MPs who carry the name Labour in their descriptions and their introductions and their identities. So there was absolute silence when Jim Shannon spoke. And then other MPs spoke, including a Labour member of parliament from the north of England. And this one was Afzal. I have to get his full name because unlike Jim Shannon's full name, I don't know the Afzal. Is it Afzal Khan who spoke as well during the discussion on the and the fact that they were kind of observing because they were observing the distance rule. And here is the reference to Afzal Khan. It is Afzal Khan. I knew his Afzal part of the name, but I didn't know his second name, which is Khan. And What Afzal Khan said in his speech was as heartbreaking. This is the moment he said, Lever MP Afzal Khan said, my beloved mom died of COVID in March 2020. She died alone in hospital while I sat in the car outside, trying to be as close to her as I could. Now that is the heartbreaking kind of example of heartbreaking memories that MPs kind of shared with other MPs in the House of Commons yesterday. And they were doing that to illustrate the defiance of the very rules that these heartbroken people, MPs, were observing. Those very rules were being broken brazenly by Boris Johnson and his party goers at number 10 Downing Street. And that is what preceded today's, that is Wednesday's Prime Minister's questions. Now, as I said, I'd discuss the actual PMQs, that is the questions. And the questions were all the questions at Prime Minister's questions. There are 6 allocated questions, 6 separate questions that the leader of the opposition is given as part of the arrangement going for some time. But contrary to what Vicky Young said ahead of the PMQ starting a few minutes later, that Keir Starmer was a barrister, she said, and I'm quoting her, not acknowledging that term barrister, because I think barristers are licensed law traders. It is not a dignified position. And so what happened was that when he stood up, that is Keir Starmer, Keir Starmer was overhyped by Vicky Young because she did not have to say anything to do with his license status as law trader. But she said that as a brainwashing tool to prime the gullibles across Little England that his being a, quote, barrister contained in that description evidence that he was going to be rigorous, ethical, moral, intellectual, democratic, and so on. When Keir Starmer did use his 6 allocated separate questions, he didn't deliver rigor. He didn't deliver courage, intellect, ethics, morality, originality. He didn't deliver anything. Not even the kind of things that the Daily Mail, which has been a persistent Becca, said on the front page, which is the party over for Johnson? What Keir Starmer did was kind of deliver a jobbing kind of performance, jobbing 6 questions. And this is what he did. And on pages 6 and 7 of the Daily Mail of Wednesday, the 12th of January 2022, they highlight on the two-page spread, highlight the kind of question and the emotionally charged question or statement that Jim Shannon made. And what happened while he was speaking? He stopped. He couldn't go on. And he was crying at that point about the grief he still feels and felt about his mother-in-law dying alone while none of her relations and children or anybody could be with her because they were all following the rules, the very rules that Boris Johnson and his number 10 cabal were breaking, and they were having a kind of party, which was they're having laughs, and they were, quote, enjoying themselves. And on the pages next to that, pages 8 and 9 are the pieces. One is by Sue Reed. Sue Reed is a long-standing racist, anti-migrant, quote, journalist in the Daily Mail. But here, her piece about her husband Nigel reads, the headline is, while they, that is Boris Johnson et al., partied, I was cheated out of the last days with my dying partner. Well, I said that Nigel was her husband, but she says her dying partner. So they may not have been married, but they were like married people for a long time now. I'm sure she will say at some point in this article how long she had been with Nigel, how many years. And she describes how Nigel was mistreated by the nurse. Now we'll talk about the kind of two lines of propaganda around the words NHS and all the NHS workers, mainly focusing on the work of the nurses. And we shall then talk about the theme of the NHS being destroyed by the Conservative government, so-called, fronted by Boris Johnson and his cabal. Okay, so let's read some of Sue Reed's pieces. Reed is spelled R-E-I-D, not R-E-A-D. My most precious possession is the birthday card my partner Nigel gave me as he was dying. That's the first sentence. I keep it close by my bedside and blow a kiss to it every morning. Nigel gave me the card with a message inside on the afternoon of May the 20th, 2020, a glorious spring day. That was the sunny evening of the Downing Street garden party, where mask-free guests mingled from 6 p.m. to share bottles of bring your own wine. The tables, no doubt, were being set up for that illicit soiree. Soiree is an evening gathering of drinking and enjoying, etc. When Nigel and I met in the lobby of a private North London hospital, where he was being treated. The COVID rules were draconian. Both of us were masked to the hilt, and I even donned an old pair of large purple sunglasses to avoid catching the virus through my eyes or passing it to Nigel. Now, the memory of that dreadfully sad day seems even more cruel. How angry it has made me to think of myself and Nigel, who used to play tennis with Boris Johnson and considered himself a fan of the Prime Minister, were taken for fools by the government. Every painful memory of the birthday visit has come flooding back to me with renewed agony as more details emerge of how those who ran the country, she's meaning Boris Johnson and his cabal, during the pandemic, that was the first year of the pandemic, that is 2020, and imposed its wretched rules on the rest of us, were so ready to flout them themselves. What I would have given, what I would have given to spend that last birthday with Nigel in a spacious London garden, sipping a glass of fine wine and laughing without a care in the world, as he always made me feel. Special permission had been granted for my birthday visit because Nigel had persuaded the hospital's most senior administrator personally. His case was an emergency intravenous antibiotics. Intravenous antibiotics were no emergency. Intravenous antibiotics were being pumped into his 6 foot 4 inch body to battle sepsis. Sepsis is not COVID, but that is part of the condition or illness he had. It was thought he'd become infected through his chemo port during 4 months of grueling medical treatment. I was so excited to see him, but he was clearly a weakened soul. I had brought a small picnic to try to make it an occasion, but the ever polite Nigel struggled to touch it. He had lost stones in weight. His trousers were falling off. His face was sunken, his skin so pale. As I looked into his brown eyes, I was terrified at his deterioration. But I didn't want to frighten him by saying that out loud. At one stage, my gaze wandered over Nigel's head as he sat forlornly in a chair in the lobby. A delivery man walked in from the road outside, and waited with a parcel outside the lift a few feet from us. He was wearing a mask, and I was so enraged I took a photo of him on my phone. I also took a snap of an unmasked hospital patient leaving the same lift and going outside to smoke a cigarette. There wasn't a glance or a rebuke from the hospital's reception desk. Clearly, there were already pandemic rules for some, but not for others in this hospital. Just as over in Downing Street that same day, the glasses were being polished and the guest list totted up. Like thousands of others obeying the rules, often at a huge personal cost. I feel as though I have been laughed at by the hypocrites stalking the corridors of power. I realize that Nigel and I were cheated of our time together in his final days. We were desperate. We were desperately keen to see each other, messaging one another 18 times a day, as he was incarcerated in a room at the hospital with no visits allowed. Now, this is Sue Reed. Sue Reed has been, if not the, but one of the most racist and dishonest campaigners against migrants from Africa and Asia in this country or into this country. But this is a personal piece about her loss and her bereavement, and that is why I'm reading this. I'm reading this without any malice, despite her contemptible racist career. We were desperately keen to see each other, messaging one another 18 times a day, as he, that is Nigel, was incarcerated in a room at the hospital with no visits allowed, so she couldn't visit him. So she was sending text messages or messages if they were using other forms. We were desperately keen to see each other. By then, Nigel had said his nurses had told him the hospital was overwhelmed with COVID and non COVID patients being transferred there by a National Health Service unable to cope. Nigel had been diagnosed with bile duct cancer in January 2020. Soon after, he began chemotherapy. He collapsed and became delirious. It was, said the oncologists, caused by a mystery infection. His final hospital visit was 2 weeks before my birthday, when the private doctors rang our home to say tests showed he had the mystery infection again and must go in immediately. I went with him in a black cab to the hospital's door. I was hurried away after being told he would be isolated in one room because of the pandemic, although he never tested positive for COVID at any stage. I would not be allowed to see him, and nor would any of his family. I could not speak to the doctors face to face. The result was that I could not stand by his bedside and fight his corner as a. I'm reading this purely as a factual evidence and a piece, a humanitarian piece. As a loving partner should. He was totally alone. Then came my heart-wrenching birthday. I have looked up our messages and emails just beforehand. Come soon, said Nigel, who admitted he was struggling even to type on his mobile because he felt so ill. I said I had my phone under my pillow and would run to his side night or day, if I was allowed. On my birthday, 20th of May, I sat in the private hospital lobby and waited for him. Nigel came down in the lift, a female nurse helping him, before collapsing into the chair and handing me a birthday card to SD, his nickname for me, which stood for Sue Darling. Darling SD, he wrote. How could I not mention today how you transformed my life? And she writes the whole thing there. what Nigel wrote for her. And she said that she held him for a second. And just as I did so, that jolly evening party, that is, the party she's referring to is the one that was being held in the number 10 Downing Street. That jolly evening party was beginning only a few miles away, attended by those men and women who had made Nigel and I so terrified of touching when he was already so near to death. 7 days later, Nigel was sent home. He passed away on our sofa after 36 hours without another word from the hospital. We held each other beforehand as my birthday card with Nigel's beautiful, endearing message to me rested on the mantelpiece. And those treasured moments are something the suspected rule breakers of number 10, Downing Street, she means, can never take away from us, however contemptible their own behavior. Now, this television channel, which is broadcast only on the internet, not on the satellite, not on the terrestrial, nor cable networks platforms. But of course, this is a television broadcast, and anyone can actually access this. And we call this edition, and we've been calling the editions, although they are Khoodeelaar television channel broadcasts, we're calling them thematically as BabyAngelGeronimo editions. That is to say, that's the banner, the main banner under which we are broadcasting. What we are doing in continuing with the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street is highlighting, focusing on, and factually updating on the regime that Boris Johnson embodies and represents and typifies and fronts. The regime, the cabal that Boris Johnson actually embodies, typifies, represents in the technical sense, not in the ethical, moral sense. And Boris Johnson and the rest of the cabal have done things to the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people during the pandemic kind of lockdown, social distancing, and the complete ban on the kind of meeting of people, very seriously ill people and their loved ones and their members of their families. That breach of the very rules that Sue Reed refers to, and the rules that Jim Shannon was actually in effect referring to, and the rules that Afzal Khan was observing while he sat in his car, or sat in the car if it didn't belong to him, outside the hospital where his mother was dying alone. Now, all the all the descriptions, all the descriptions of brutality that are contained in the work of Charles Dickens, for example, brutality of selfish, greedy people. These are works of fiction, and these are contained in the fiction and they're treated as fiction. Little is realized of the kind of real life brutality and cruelty and kind of unkindness shown by human beings, like the ones that make the decisions to harm a perfectly innocent being. And for 4 years plus, the department called DEFRA, which is part of the UK central government departments, conspired to do severe damage and harm to the perfectly healthy, beautiful baby angel Geronimo. So the baby angel Geronimo has been witnessing for years the complete, utter, absolute depth of cruelty and criminality and heartlessness and remorselessness shown by serial liars, congenital liars, and criminals occupying the positions which they abuse to tell lies, conceived lies against innocent targets whom they want to cause severe, indescribable pain and harm and hurt. Those are the kind of detailed plan and purpose that for years the criminals at the DEFRA have been confecting against the perfectly innocent, perfectly healthy baby angel Geronimo. That is why we have chosen baby angel Geronimo as the world's best witness, the most ethical witness, and the most moral witness of the cruelties and criminalities, of the evil doing, wrongdoing, intentional wrongdoing and criminality and law breaking by Boris Johnson and his cabal, because Boris Johnson has aided and has been aiding and abetting the depraved criminals at DEFRA. The frontier of the depraved criminals is, of course, George Injustice Eustace, aided internally by a woman described as the chief bat, called Christian Middlemiss. Miss is the word that I shall focus on and use as the central kind of evidence or evidential kind of description. She missed the truth. She missed the truth, and in the middle, she inserted the lies. That is middle miss. The center of the whole confection of lies and conspiracy and misstatements about baby angel Geronimo were, let's say, to be found in her name. Middle means she miss the middle, the center, the core, and she infected and inflicted her so-called professional series of poisonous lies, inventions against the most innocent baby angel Geronimo. So all the victims of Boris Johnson fronted cabal's abuse of their positions and their disregard of the truthful feelings of the targeted victims and obstructed people. All the evidence in terms of the actual corruption, criminality, lying can be found in what Baby Angel Geronimo has been witnessing. So that is why it is called Baby Angel Geronimo Editions. He is the leading witness to millions of lies that Boris Johnson fronted cabal has been perpetrating against innocent targets of the so-called rule, which he and hundreds of his fellow criminals and lawbreakers have been openly and brazenly, dishonestly breaking without any regard for the rules that the others have been forced under threat of penalty or penalties to observe. And in observing, those have been forced fascistically to be deprived of the last meetings and last opportunity to be with their dying loved ones. Cruelty of that kind, degeneration, depravity, and evil doing of that kind is something that must be exposed and opposed and diagnosed and described so that these are not repeated. All the ideas of justice and fairness and love have been taken away from the equation where it came to the rules having to be observed by the loved ones when their loved ones were being prevented from being seen and met by their closest relations at the last hours of their lives. And those rules that did that were being broken openly by Boris Johnson on the 20th of May. But the point is not confined to just one off 20th of May. It went on all the time and it is still going on. So that is a description, updated description of why we call it Baby Angel Geronimo editions. We shall now turn to some of the things that Johnson, the congenital liar, spewed and spewed during the Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday the 12th. Wednesday the 12th of January 2022. And Shannon's voice, according to the Mirror, this is the version of the speech that Jim Shannon made. Jim Shannon said, in Northern Ireland, we reached the milestone of 3,000 deaths due to COVID just last week. 3,000 people who followed the rules, including my mother-in-law who died alone. Mr. Shannon's voice choked as he struggled through the rest of his question. Tory benches were sparsely attended, that is to say, most MPs didn't attend the debate on Tuesday, while opposition MPs packed the chamber. As the Metropolitan Police confirmed, it was in talks with the Cabinet Office over the leaked email. Shameless Mr. Ellis, who is a government minister, told MPs Boris Johnson was a man of integrity and honor. Then minutes later refused to say the Prime Minister would resign if he broke the law. It came as formal legal proceedings were issued against the Metropolitan Police for failing to investigate a separate number 10 Christmas party held on 18th of December 2020. Mr. Mohan, director of the Good Law Project, said, "You can have the rule of law or you can defer to the powerful, but you can't have both." Cressida Dix, that is the commissioner of the London Metropolitan Police, Cressida Dix's cat will know that multiple criminal offences were committed. It shames the mat and ultimately all of us that she refuses to investigate. And so on, it goes on to say. Now, by talking about the cat, obviously, Joe Mon is being stupid because he is assuming that cats are less intelligent than humans. That's not the case, but that's what his use of the word cat actually represents about his mentality. This is the same man, Jomon, despite the fact that he's now featuring on a different context and contextual kind of issue. He is the one who boasted that he had murdered a fox, and he's a licensed law trader. Now, this Joe Mon is not therefore somebody that we should kind of rely on, but that is part of the piece in the Daily Mirror online. And there are other issues ongoing at the same time. We shall come to that section in a minute. Now, the Daily Mail of Wednesday, as we are saying, in addition to reporting about Sue Reed's partner Nigel, this is the main kind of item on page 8, the heading. Now, grieving families tell Boris, say sorry. And there are 3 columns. My mom died alone, aged 98. And it's an insult to my daughter. Ruby Fuller, 18, had to say her final goodbye to family via Zoom. The teenager pictured, now Ruby Fuller is pictured with a headscarf, 18-year-old girl. The teenager pictured had relapsed from blood cancer and died at home in Crystal Palace, South London, on 15th of May 2020, 5 days before the Number 10 party. Number 10 party was on 20th of May. COVID restrictions meant she could only speak to her grandparents, cousins, and friends via video call before she passed away. Her mother, Emma Jones, said, "I feel upset, angry, and also stupid that we followed the rules so closely. It is just so incredibly insulting." And so these are the items that actually are included in the coverage of the lies by Boris Johnson published in the Daily Mail. And there is a piece by Andrew Pierce. It says it's a report, it's not a comment. But Andrew Pierce does not report, he comments. Andrew Pierce is the warmongering Tony Blair supporter and a fanatic promoter of the Brexiteering agenda. And he is completely shameless and immoral. But there he is in the Daily Mail being given a big platform, increasingly bigger platform. Now, he is not, contrary to the appearance of his being critical, he is not critical of the so he's saying that Dominic Cummings is bitter, vengeful, obsessed, and is carrying a box of lethal secrets to kill off his old boss, that is Boris Johnson, and put Rishi Sunak in number 10 Downing Street. Now that's Andrew Pierce. Now that's Andrew Pierce. That is Andrew Pierce. Because of the reflection on the kind of paper from the light, there can be lack of visibility of the image, but there was Andrew Pierce. Now, what he's saying there is so he's Andrew Pierce is not being critical of Boris Johnson's lies, cruelty, law breaking, evil doing at all. He's having a go at Dominic Cummings. He's saying that Cummings will not rest until Boris Johnson and his current wife, he's not saying current, but I'm saying current, Kerry Simmons, have left, that is, Boris Johnson has left the post of Prime Minister. So, by world exclusively diagnosing Fleet Street, this is the kind of thing we find that is not obvious to people who are reading the papers. Because 99% of the people who read the stuff, either in the printed Fleet Street papers or in the internet versions, remember that not all the internet versions of the news outlets are without cost, what is called paywalled. So the Daily Mail website is still available without paywall, but the Rupert Murdoch scum internet version is not. Now, there are so many things that Boris Johnson embodies, and so many, these are wrong things I'm talking about. So many things that Boris Johnson actually intentionally, perpetually, persistently commits that are wrong without any mitigating element to them. For example, one of the things that Boris Johnson has boasted about not far long ago, that he has said that greed is good. Greed is good. Now, greed is an evil. It's not good. It cannot be good. So, anyone who, like Boris Johnson, can openly, brazenly say that greed is good, then it must be presumed that they are immoral. So there is a comment by, we'll come to the comment by Michael Gove's recently kind of separated wife, Sarah Vine, whom we call Sarah Vane. And this is a long piece, so-called editorial in the Daily Mail about Boris Johnson's dishonesty. And anyone who thinks that this is the headline that is actually critical of Boris Johnson and does represent critical line by the Daily Mail about Boris Johnson's dishonesty and heartless and cruelty and corruption needs to know that this is not true. Because beneath the headlines and beyond the headlines in the editorial, the Daily Mail remains servilely loyal to the serial liar Johnson. This editorial ends with this absolutely dishonest and corrupt paragraph. So often during the pandemic, the Prime Minister, that is Johnson, has got the big decisions right. He has not. And we can go on for hours detailing how Johnson has been getting it wrong on everything. But he has undoubtedly made mistakes. He must ensure this doesn't become the biggest mistake of all. What on earth is this stupid, lying, dishonest, criminal Daily Mail editorial meaning? I mean, more than because there is the constant denial of the actual numbers of people who have died due to neglect by the government, due to dishonesty by the government, and so on. Their number is 200,000 people have died. But the reality is that double that number would have died. And the editorial in the Daily Mail just is a tip of the iceberg of lying by the Fleet Street papers, which claim that they are critical of Johnson. They are not. And here is the daily bribing and buying Boris Johnson grab. Johnson losing Tory support. We'll go back to Sarah Vane in a minute in the Daily Mail. But this is this is a misleading front, because inside the paper, the daily buying and bribing Boris Johnson grab, there is this completely contradictory, dishonest line. Okay, so this is the wife of the kind of this is the wife of Michael Gove, who is the kind of member of parliament, now being the Secretary of State, the cabinet member for the so-called department for leveling up, or the task of leveling up. So this one is a Sarah Vanity, Michael Gove's recently separated wife. Some say she and Gove are more than separated. They have been divorced, but no confirmation can be found, at least not by us, anywhere publicly accessible. So let's say they're separated, that is for sure. But despite the fact that she separated from Gove and vice versa, the actual political content and the agenda that Sarah Vanity, supports remains unchanged. It's conservative, and to quote Angela Rayner's recent description, one-word description, scum. For the first time since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, I'm worried about the country's future, she says. I am by no means a blind cheerleader of the government, she pretends. But nevertheless, I do believe it to be infinitely preferable to the hard left alternative, the current Labour front bench. Now, if she says that, and she means Keir Starmer as a hard left, then of course she is a worse liar and criminal than appears to be the case. There is no hard left in this country anywhere. Absolutely nowhere. So where did she find this hard left? So that is the diagnosis of Fleet Street. World exclusive original diagnosis by us of the liars of Fleet Street. And the Fleet Street liars, as I said about Sue Reed. Sue Reed, even after talking emotionally or writing emotionally about her partner Nigel, remains loyal to the criminal, Boris Johnson, and his cabal. And the Daily Mail, despite the fact that it runs from time to time, runs kind of noticeable, eye-catching headlines that innocent people, the gullibles reading these kind of headlines, front pages, may mistake as being genuine expressions of criticism of the corrupt, criminal, heartless, cruel, evil-doing Boris Johnson and his cabal. If they do that, that would be wrong, because the actual political support for the right-wing criminal, cruel regime of Boris Johnson remains intact in the Daily Mail. So this is the world exclusive diagnosis. That is what we diagnose and find in the diagnosis. That is Sarah Venity. That vine we call vein, because of our career of lying. So she says current Labour front bench is hard left. And she says, or the Marxism light on offer from Ed Davis Liberal Democrats. Now, she is so stupid that the fact that she is so stupid and dishonest, and yet she is one of the longest ranging or longest lasting columnists given platforms, prominent platform by the Daily Mail, shows the depth of stupidity of the majority of the Little Englanders, because that is the people, the Little Englanders, that she targets as her audience. Let's go back to the Channel 4 news program, that edition which was fronted by this woman on Channel 4 News, Kathy Newman. Kathy Newman is the kind of short person with probably an artificially blonde colored hair, but that's the one with the blonde hair, curly blonde hair. And she's not very tall. And she presented an edition of the Channel 4 News during the run-up to the leadership election of the Lib Dems, in which election Ed Davey was elected. But that was before the actual election, so it was like a hustings on Channel 4 News that both Joe Swinson and Ed Davey attended. At one point, abruptly, Cathy Newman asked them, would they press the nuclear button? And although they answered at the same time, if a long-ranging forensic analysis is made of the time each one took before they answer, before they press the button, both of them said yes to the question Cathy Newman kind of put to them without such a question being apparent in the previous parts of the interview, so-called, or the hustling edition, because both of them were there. Now, both of them said they would press the nuclear button without any hesitation. In fact, both of them became very agitated in order to be the first to answer that question. Yes. Now, anyone who knows about the population, the demography in this country, in the UK, would know that most people in their social kind of interactions, or their interactions with one another, or whatever level, are not deeply political. They are only kind of capable, they're prone to be kind of capable of being influenced and led astray by very kind of simplistic, very simplistic and short sound bites. So when Cathy Newman put the question to the kind of wannabe leader of the Lib Dems in this country, both muttered the same thing. Yes. Now here is the point of reference that becomes relevant to the meeting that David Attenborough had with Greta Thunberg, the Swedish teenager now turned 19. And David Attenborough paid Greta Thunberg huge compliment for taking up the cause of protecting the environment. That is the kind of exceptional recognition given by a very genuine environmentalist to a genuine environment-saving campaigner. There is nothing in Saravain's career, absolutely nothing in her career as a journalist or as a kind of propagandist on the Daily Mail that has the remotest similarity with any of the ideals and ideological and factual empirical descriptions of the environment, the dangers the environment faces. There is nothing in our record. Saravain is a slimy, sleazy, insinuating criminal who should not be given any platform, let alone the very high platform that she gets given. Because what the Daily Mail doesn't do is publish the response of the people victimized by the lying, by the brainwashing. People who are caused to desperate kind of states of mind. In fact, many people reading the Daily Mail and the similar contents published by Katie Price and the other criminals that have been exposed by the Sunday Times as being involved with the Sunday Times exposure remains to be properly updated in the next kind of week when the Sunday Times, or next weekend when the Sunday Times appears again, because the Sunday Times in the last Sunday's schedules, we didn't find a copy of it in the net, in the outlet where we buy the daily newspapers, and so therefore we did not go into the actual details in the inside pages of the Sunday Times last Sunday. But it is absolutely certain that next Sunday's papers, including the Observer, and I'm sure tomorrow's papers, but we shall only say this in this way, that tomorrow's paper, that is Thursday, the 13th of January 2022, Thursday's papers, Fleet Street papers, will not have enough reactions to Boris Johnson's latest set of lies. So we expect that the papers, Fleet Street papers, on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday will continue heavy duty kind of contents about Boris Johnson. When I say heavy duty, I do not mean critical, but they are obviously the right wingers in Fleet Street and the liars in Fleet Street who all support Boris Johnson, not because of his lying, but because he is a conservative. And they all support the conservatives. So what Sarabhai is doing is not talking about the cruelty of Boris Johnson and his cabal and the illegality and the evil wrongdoing by Boris Johnson and his cabal, but that there were draconian rules in the first place. She's not saying that Boris Johnson behaved criminally, which he did. She's not saying Boris Johnson behaved in a criminally entitled way, which is fact. She's saying that it's the fault of the rules, not the fault of the rule breakers. Remember, it is Johnson and his cabal that have broken the rules, not the other people in the public, among the many. So instead of saying that Johnson should go, Sarah Bennett says that Johnson is innocent. And so the line is there. Andrew Pierce, who is a liar, is writing an apparently topically critical piece, but in fact it turns out that he is attacking Dominic Cummings. Not that we are holders of any brief for anyone, including Dominic Cummings. And this daily buying and bribing Boris Johnson graph of the Wednesday, the 12th of January 2022, runs a picture of the conservative, that is Tory, Boris Johnson's side of the House of Commons. And sitting are 4 and standing is 1. So there are 5 Conservative MPs on their benches, which is hardly occupied. And the opposition benches are the ones that were very full yesterday. There are 2 pieces on pages 4 and 5 of the daily buying and bribing Boris Johnson grab about the London Metropolitan Police on the left-hand side on the page 4, refusing to start a police inquiry into the Partygate scandal and number 10 Downing Street. And on the next page is the heading to a piece, Johnson aide involved in another boozy gathering. Now, there is no way that any of the evidence available to him was even remotely kind of put by Starmer to Johnson today in the Prime Minister's questions. Because any competent look at the various lines of command and the various kind of steps of orders that travel within the number 10 Downing Street complex, every single item of political agenda or the agenda within the number 10 Downing Street is carried out, conducted by expressly noting among the staff that they are doing the same thing ideologically that the Prime Minister Boris Johnson would himself do. So the question is, who ever gave any reason to Boris Johnson to assume impunity from accountability on anything? So there is this piece on the daily buying Boris Johnson graph, which we are reading at 23:56 hours GMT, which is 4 minutes to midnight into Thursday the 13th of January 2022. There is this heading in the daily buying Boris Johnson graph. Johnson hanging in a thread. I'll read that again. Johnson hanging by a thread, says former minister, as his own MPs turn against him. Let's see. This is the Telegraph, which is a bigger size. It is still the broadsheet size, not the tabloid size. So on the right side of the viewer, looking is Jim Shannon, who is photographed as he broke down. And this one on page 4 of the daily buying and bribing Boris Johnson graph, it says Metropolitan Police decline to launch Partygate inquiry. And this one is from the front page of the daily buying Boris Johnson graph, which is Johnson hanging by a thread, says former minister, as his own MPs turn against him. So this is the front page, which is Johnson losing Tory support. And there is this item about the Johnson losing Tory support. Public backlash as polls find up to 66% think Boris Johnson should step down. So there was this universal unanimity among Free Street papers saying that Boris Johnson should go. So here are the ones that we'll be looking at. This one is the Financial Times. Again, this one is saying in the contents of this front page of the Financial Times, crimes which we are reading at 2 minutes to midnight, 23:58 hours GMT on Wednesday, the 12th of January 2022. And it says Johnson faces potentially terminal showdown over Downing Street parties. And again, under that heading, they're really watering down that heading. In effect, they're saying that the demand grows for him to apologize. Now, what Nonsense. Johnson's apology cannot bring back any of the lost, phenomenally important and emotional losses. There is an editorial piece about Kazakhstan being open to Russian takeover. And there is an opinion piece by a woman called Erika Marat. Erika Marat is associate professor at the College of International Security Affairs of the National Defense University, Washington, D.C., and Asel Tutumulu of Near East University contributed to this article. Asel Tutumlu. Now, this is a piece about Kazakhstan paying the price for ignoring public discontent. And there is a piece about Johnson should come clean on lockdown party. And what the financial crimes is doing is exactly what the other Free Street papers have done. And Johnson has no evidence that Johnson will ever tell the truth. And how? Because in his, what the Daily Mail online says, the heavily lawyered, that is to say, the script that he delivered as being his answers today to Keir Starmer. The script that he delivered, Boris Johnson, that is, in relation to the 6 routine questions put to him, the script was completely lawyered, as the Daily Mail online said. And as it was lawyered, it was completely full of lies. Now, the fact that Boris Johnson is a proven congenital liar means that anything he delivered didn't have to be lawyered. Why? Because if it is true that no rules are broken, so if the actual reality is that we have just crossed into 2 seconds or 3 seconds into Thursday, 3 seconds past, 3 minutes past midnight into Thursday, the 13th of January 2022. And there is this piece about healthcare. The heading on page 2 is, it's a piece by Daniel Thomas. Welcome trust to boost research on vaccines. The main reason is as virus lingers. Now, one of the first things that we said when we started these broadcasts about 2 years ago remains true, which is that when the National Health Service as an idea was launched in the late 1940s in the UK, which was boasting about this being a world-class initiative, etc., etc. The bragging and the boasting still continues around the NHS. While as compared to the late 1940s and now, reality shows that the NHS was never prepared to face anything like the pandemic. And we have said originally that no hospital, the NHS hospital, or no NHS kind of hospital trust of any description has been delivering people the healthcare at the point of need. That is staggering. So no newspaper in Fleet Street has said what we have been saying. And we shall continue to update on what we have said just now again. And we shall continue to ask the question, has the Labour Party, which makes more claims than the Conservatives about being the national NHS founder party, has the Labour Party leadership done the right thing to make the NHS exempt from market forces and exploitation by market forces, market elements? And the Financial Crimes saying that Johnson should come clean on lockdown party is missing the point. Johnson will not come clean, as he showed. He has shown in the PMQs on 12th of January 2022. He says that he regrets or he wishes that we, that is him and his cabal, had done things differently. It's a million miles away from him saying that he regrets breaking the rules. Think about that. He never said he broke the rules, and he kept saying he wishes that things were done differently. What a stupid presumption that he thinks that the people he was addressing, both in the parliament and by the media, of course, the rest of the country, would be fooled by this stupid linguistic dishonesty. We shall come to that later in this edition again, but let's check what the Murdoch scum is saying. So this is the 4-page advertisement by Sainsbury's on this scum. This must be worth millions of pounds that Sainsbury is spending on the advertisement. Not just scum, but other papers are wrapped around by this advertisement. 4 pages, which is a lot of money. There is this 2-page spread on this Sun, which we're saying on the record Sun, but it's actually scum. Garden Partygate, Crisis engulfs Downing Street, sort it out or go, Bojo. That is the 2-page spread that the scum is running. But again, this is misleading. That's not what they mean. Because they are saying that Johnson has done most things right, like getting the COVID thing right, but he didn't. Anyway, in the following pages 6 and 7, Jim Shannon is given the main space and also a quotation attributed to Afzal Khan. My mom died alone in hospital while I sat in the car outside. There's Afzal Khan, the MP, who obeyed the rules and heartbreakingly sat in the car outside the hospital, and his mom died alone without him being allowed to see her. And the scum is still advising Johnson to win back the public. They're not asking him to resign. They're saying he should do something to win back the public. There is a very small item about this Baroness Underwear, who is pronounced Michelle Moan, is being sued for unlimited damages after an alleged racist comment. And it's a small item. And the criminal who is in jail for quite a few years for the acid attack in Hackney was kind of pictured with a so-called new girlfriend after he was ditched by, apparently, his actress wife. Now that Instagram account, this scum says, has vanished. And the Times says on page 1 of the paper, dated Wednesday, the 12th of January 2022, telling Boris Johnson, say sorry or doom us all, ministers tell Johnson. That is false, because him saying sorry won't bring back any of the people. So what Johnson needs is not to be made to say sorry, or not to be allowed to get away by saying a false sorry, which he did at the Prime Minister's question time. We shall come to that again shortly. There is a piece in the Times saying that Abu Hamza's son is jailed over identity fraud. Now, anyone watching this from outside of the UK may not readily understand or recognize the name Abu Hamza. Abu Hamza, as part of our world exclusive diagnosis of the behavior of the Muslim so-called leaders in the UK, we assert that Abu Hamza was an absolute idiot, tactically absolute idiot from the start. When he began the kind of stupid charade outside the Finsbury Park Mosque, Abu Hamza was being stupid, idiotic, because that is the last kind of way to allegedly enlighten people about Islam. That was to, whatever he did outside the Finsbury Park Mosque, actually did and would be guaranteed to lead to people misunderstanding Islam. Now, if that is the height of the intellectual height of the Muslim leadership, then God forgive us. That is humanity about these leaders. So you can look up Abu Hamza and you can find much more content about various things that he has been associated with. And here is a picture of a man who's called Tito Ibn Sheikh, plotted to launder nearly £350,000. Now, here is the prosecution kind of person involved in the prosecution of Abu Hamza's son Tito. And this prosecution person is reported by the Times as saying, well, his name is Russell Tyner. So I'll read the whole paragraph. Russell Tyner of the Crown Prosecution Service. I'll read it again. Russell Tyner of the Crown Prosecution Service's Organized Crime Division said, Ibn Sheikh was perfectly willing to bank and move large amounts of stolen money. The number of passports and other ID showed he was more than just a neutral recipient of the cash. He was an active and willing participant in the conspiracy, and he had the ability and means to create false accounts to launder cash. In that paragraph, there are several references to bank. Now, that shows, if that is true, that there are banks that allow criminals and launderers, individuals and gangs to open bank accounts, then that is proof, conclusive proof, that the banks in this country are engaged in theft and criminality, and that banking has a right to use the banks for cash and checks or whatever financial transactions that is. Now, the experience that our movement has witnessed and continues to witness shows the opposite, that bank accounts are not allowed to the many. So the fact that criminals can get any number of bank accounts without any problem shows that criminals are doing business through the banks, and the banks are therefore fronts of the operations of the criminals. UK banks are effectively engaged in theft, laundering, and so on. What we are doing is looking at the banks in detail in a dedicated kind of edition. And the editorial in the Times of Wednesday, 12th of January 2022, is headed Party Politics. And the subheading, that is a description of the heading, says successive breaches of lockdown by government officials demonstrate a shameful disregard for public duty. A diminished Prime Minister must now give direct answers. Again, the Times is lying. It sounds that the Times did this editorial, sounds like the Times is critical of the law breaking by Boris Johnson, but they make it clear that they are not referring to Boris Johnson. They say government officials. Now, how does that lead to the conclusion that the breaches have diminished the Prime Minister, who therefore must now give direct answers? Of course, he gave direct answers to the Prime Minister's questions. And that shows the stupidity of the times. Why would they want him to give any answers that are not the truth? So instead of saying direct answers, the Times editorial or leader column or leader comment of 12th January 2022, published on the 12th of January 2022, must contain only the truth. And there is no suggestion in the Times that all lies should be stopped and the truth alone, or only the truth, must be stated by the cabal. So, as I said before, every critical piece in Fleet Street about Johnson ends by giving him advice as to how to stay in power. This is not something that should be allowed. If he has done wrong, and there is no need for an inquiry because everyone remembers, and the email shows, the text shows that he lied, there is no newspaper, not Times, not the Scum, not the Daily Mail, saying that Johnson should go. Why are they doing this? Why are they reluctant to say that Johnson should resign? They're saying here in this, since Boris Johnson announced a lockdown in March 2020, the public has complied with restrictions on civil liberties, unprecedented in peacetime history of modern Britain. So Johnson and some of his number 10 colleagues, on the other hand, have conducted themselves with cavalier disregard for the rules. That is the inevitable implication of a leaflet. That is the ineluctable implication of a leaked email sent by one of the Prime Minister's So let's read that. That is the ineluctable implication of a leaked email sent by one of the Prime Minister's top officials less than 2 months into the first lockdown. At that stage of the pandemic, people in England were limited to meetings in the open air only. 1% beyond that immediate household and large gatherings were forbidden. Yet Martin Reynolds, head of the Prime Minister's office, head of the Prime Minister's private office, invited more than 100 Downing Street staff. Head of the Prime Minister's private office invited more than 100 Downing Street staff to a drinks party in the garden of number 10. And then it goes weak. The event took place on the 20th of May 2020. Witnesses confirmed that about 40 people attended. Mr. Edison, Mr. Reynolds, Conservative MPs had the luckless task yesterday of applying the most polished patina they could to these tergiversations. We shall check that word. They maintained yesterday that Mr. and Mrs. Johnson have the right to use their own garden, that Downing Street, and the stuff. So, what this Times editorial is saying is exactly what we have said the other Fleet Street papers are saying. They are not criticizing Johnson, and they're most certainly not demanding his removal from the office. So the I newspaper on the front page cover, the front cover says PM's future in jeopardy as stories rage at lockdown drinks party. Again, they're not asking for him to kind of resign. They're not calling him a liar. This is ridiculous. And this personal view by this I newspaper editor is called a letter from the editor. Oliver Duff is typically, again, kind of failing to tell the truth himself while he's saying that people's anger will grow when the truth is not being told. He's not telling the truth either. And he's only proving and Angela Rayner is being a quote, is being given a small quote there by the eye, which says near her photograph, Labour's deputy leader Angela Rayner scolded the Prime Minister's absence from an urgent question tabled in the Commons about the latest party allegations, saying the move speaks volumes. Boris Johnson swerved a Commons grilling yesterday sending Paymaster General Michael Ellis in his place. Miss Rayner asked why Mr. Johnson had not attended the meeting, adding, quote, "The public have drawn their conclusions. It won't wash to blame this on junior civil servants. The Prime Minister sets the tone." And the picture is by Jessica Taylor, AFP news agency. And this has got on this page 8 of the I newspaper, there is a insert picture of the same Jim Shannon, taken from his short statement about his mother-in-law dying alone. So the heading is "Careless Government Losing Our Trust," says ethics chief. Let's see the beginning of that piece, if they kind of are consistent with the heading and the content. Members of the government have been careless over ethical standards, putting the public's faith in their integrity at risk. The UK's top standards watchdog have warned. Jonathan Evans, the former MI5 chief, who now chairs the Committee on Standards in Public Life, said allegations of drinks parties in Downing Street added a whole series of Congress questions over the government's conduct. He warned that ministers and civil servants were undermining their own work because they have to devote so much effort to tackling the multiple scandals. Lord Evans told the Commons Public Administration Committee and Constitutional Affairs Committee, "We have seen a whole series of issues over the last few months. The Owen Paterson affair, the attempt to change the rules over standards investigations, is in the middle of the investigation into Mr. Patterson's actions. The questions around the redecoration of Downing Street, and particularly the very bad processes that were clearly in place for keeping Lord Git properly informed, the Grensill affair, and now Partygate. All of those, I think, have demonstrated that there is at least a carelessness amongst people in government over standards issues, and possibly more than that. And You only need, I think, to look at one media reporting, and you only need, I think, to look up at as look at the media reporting, the front pages of the newspapers over the past few months, and to some extent, of course, the polling, to see that people are concerned about these issues, that those who are being paid to undertake public roles should be living up to the standards that they profess to live up to. Now, who is this person they're quoting? It's Ellis. He also said that it will be in the government's own interest to monitor standards breaches more closely by telling MPs. I think it would have been very prudent proactively to ensure that people were being careful about those things in advance. He added that reading that again, he added that ministers should consider asking lawyers to investigate alleged rule breaking, but added that only the Prime Minister can leave. Now, reading that again, but added that only the Prime Minister can have the final authority to deliver a verdict on whether someone accused should stay in their job. Separately, Mr. Johnson's independent advisor on advisor on ministerial interests, Lord Gitt, has said that he expected to offer. Read that again. Separately, Mr. Johnson's independent advisor on ministerial interests, Lord Gitt, had said that he expects his office to be given considerably greater authority, independence, and effect by the time he publishes his annual report in April. So, what is happening with this? So, this is Paul Waugh, who is described as the I newspaper's chief political commentator. Now, here I shall read the last few paragraphs of his piece today. Johnson feels like he is slowly hemorrhaging support, and unlike a few weeks ago, he hasn't got the luxury of a Christmas break to ease the pressure or reset the agenda. At the very least, he may have to admit in PMQs today that he was indeed at the number 10 drinks event, apologize, and then say it is up to the independent inquiry to judge him and short terms, to judge him and others. Even if his backbenchers are reluctant to stage a leadership challenge while Omicron still stalks the head office of money, the head read this paragraph once again from the beginning. Even if his backbenchers are reluctant to stage a leadership challenge, while Omicron still stalks the land, many fear the public may well take disciplinary action as their own Red Henry bellows. No, disciplinary action of their own at the ballot box in this local election. Even if his backbenchers are reluctant to stage a leadership challenge, while Omicron still stalks the land, many fear that even if his backbenchers are reluctant to stage a leadership challenge with Omicron still stalks the land, many fear that even if his backbenchers are reluctant to stage a leadership challenge while Omicron still stalks the land, many fear the public may well take disciplinary action of their own at the next ballot he tries on May's local election. When a punch-drunk Michael Ellis was asked yesterday whether Johnson would resign if found to have broken the law, he replied, when a punch-drunk Michael Ellis was asked yesterday whether Johnson would resign if found to have broken this law, Michael Ellis, replied, "It's an entirely hypothetical position, shung by the unpresent." So, struck by the subsequent derisive laughter from the Stockholm Emily, so when a punch-drunk Michael Ellis was asked yesterday whether Michael Ellis was asked yesterday whether Johnson would resign if found to have broken the law enforcement, he replied, "It's an entirely hypothetical situation." It's an entirely hypothetical situation, or no, hypothetical position. Stung by the subsequent derives law from MP's adventure. So, stung by the subsequent derisive laughter from MPs, he added, the Prime Minister is going somewhere. For a growing number of his MPs, MHs, that prospect simply is not there. Simply is not on the horizon. That, stung by the subsequent derisive laughter from members of parliament, he added, the Prime Minister is going nowhere. For a growing number of the MPs, so what is happening in the Fleet Street cover up? Is that they're not talking about the truth, really, none of them. They're messing about. So this so-called straight-talking Don Nielsen in the Star is absolutely typically idiotic. And they don't even use the term liar or lie about Johnson in this stupid kind of so-called satirical humorous dig at the liar Johnson. As based on the Prime Minister's questions, let's see if there is any follow-up to this online. And the Independent says, which posted this 3 hours ago. So this is, what is the time now? This is 2 minutes to 1 local BST, 0058 hours GMT on Thursday, the 13th of January 2022. So it says the PMQs, that is Prime Minister's questions, was an example of the classic political apology. A sorry, not sorry. Editorial. It is quite something, even for Johnson, that the Prime Minister opened his statement to MPs saying, Mr. Speaker, I want to apologize, and then proceeded to do no such thing. Exactly. And they said, the independent.co.uk, from the point of view of the Prime Minister himself, his ordeal in Parliament went about as well as it could, which is to say that he will probably still be Prime Minister by the end of the week. Beyond that is paywalled. We can't access the beyond that one. And the Guardian says, in its online version, that is, that senior backbench MP joins Scottish Tory leader in calling for Johnson to resign of a number 10 lockdown party. As it happened, that was just before 9 p.m. Rishi Sunak's tepid support for Boris Johnson stands out like a sore thumb as he is backed by 26 cabinet ministers and fight to survive after groveling apology for attending party Partygate bash. And there are quite a few items about the lies inherent in Boris Johnson's answer during the Prime Minister's questions. So we shall be this is probably 3 hours. I don't want to be exact because the exact length of the broadcast will be visible once this is concluded and a video emerges. So it will be around 3 hours. We shall be continuing on these themes and updating in due course and in the due next